All right, I'm so excited. I have Chris Haddad on here. And Chris, we're going to just start with the question. We're going to dive right in. Chris, when most copywriters try storytelling, which
Yeah.
you are legendary at,
Mm.
they kind of suck, especially if they
They
try to
do.
make it emotional.
Yeah.
So, why do you think most copywriters suck so bad?
At emotion. I think a lot of copywriters suck so bad at emotion for a couple of reasons. One of which is that copywriters really like to hide behind our keyboards and not go out in the world too much and all that other kind of shit. And I think a lot of copywriters also, we've been through a lot of trauma. We tend to be kind of the misfit, an island of misfit toys, and you have to be willing to kind of address your own trauma and see it. But I think the main thing people don't understand about storytelling, I think for emotional storytelling for copy and the way I do it, is that my stories are not really about what happens at all, right? If you actually read through my stories, very little actual, like from a plot standpoint, very, very little happens. But like with the story is, it's not about what happens. It's about how what happens is affecting the actual character who's going through it or the narrator who's going through it. It's that emotional richness on the inside. That's why I usually tell all my stories first person, by the way, because I want to be able to have access to like really telling the audience all of the emotions that the character is going through so they can identify with them as much as possible. And, because people will buy from you if they like you and if they feel like you understand them. That's the number one thing I keep teaching people. It's even less about your product than it is about buying you at that point.
These are the proven direct response marketing, copywriting, and entrepreneurship success strategies you can use today to write your own ticket and create the life you want. I am Roy Furr, and this is Breakthrough Marketing Secrets. Now, here's today's breakthrough. All right, episode's done.
Yeah, there you go.
That was
I've
wow.
been doing this for a while, so shit.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. No, that's excellent. So, getting to the more formal intro
Yeah.
of the podcast, this is totally selfish. Like, I've respected Chris as a copywriter for a long time, but we've never really connected.
Mhm.
I read Chris's storytelling copy. It totally sucks me in. Even when it's not targeted at me, I want to read it. And Chris, you've made some money off of me, not just like copywriting niche, but in the romance niche.
Oh yeah, what did you buy?
Because let's see, Text the Romance Back was one of them
Good
for
program,
sure.
man. It's a good program. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like it's just pulls you in and just makes you want to like.
Thank you very much.
um,
I greatly appreciate it. It is nice to be. I went through a lot of mental health issues. I still do actually, but for a while there, and because of that, I had really low self-esteem for a really long time because my brain kept telling me these things. And coming back into business and feeling when I go to conferences and when I do this stuff, feeling the respect that people have for me in the business is really very profound. It means a lot when people say that kind of thing. It's nice to feel like I've had some impact or some that people have learned some shit from my things over the years.
yeah, and it is off the chart. So, the formal bio, Chris has
Yeah.
generated over $700 million in trackable online sales.
Mhm.
And let's see, he started freelance. He had an unbeatable 10-year VSL control for the Pimsleur approach, which
Yeah.
grew to $100 million a year company, multiple ClickBank number ones. Barton Publishing, you helped them basically from early around their launch period up to $10 million plus per year with multiple
Mhm.
VSLs.
Mhm.
Jay Diebold, tens of millions of dollars made with him. And then you said, I'm going to do my thing.
Yeah.
And you
Because being a
created.
freelancer sucks, man. Like ultimately, this is, I mean, not to be, I am extremely, so yeah, basically the short version, I'll fill in there. I eventually turned into somebody else. I started this Michael Fiore thing as a relationship advice expert, and I built my own 8-figure business doing that, going on television as somebody else, writing books like Text the Romance Back and all of that stuff. And that was what got me to a point that I'm reasonably wealthy. I'm not like, I know many people who are way richer than I am, but as far as copywriters, I've done pretty fucking damn well at this point. And that was largely because I was able to eventually move out of being a freelancer into being an offer owner and being an entrepreneur myself. And what the thing that made that possible for me was finally getting over this bullshit in my head that was telling me I was just a copywriter. I think that's a really easy trap that a lot of us can fall into. Like we're just the keyboard jockey behind everything and can't actually make those bigger decisions.
Okay, that's interesting. And I was going to talk about kind of the career trajectory stuff later,
Yeah.
but
Either way.
this identity of like just a copywriter. Um, what was that transition like? I mean, you are still one of the world's best copywriters,
Sure.
especially in this like emotional.
In my niches, there are very few people that can beat me. Yeah, in my lane, there are very few people that can ever beat me. It happens
Yeah.
occasionally because when nobody hits home runs every time. But as far as the stuff that I find interesting, yeah.
but at some point, like, I've studied plenty of like identity development stuff,
Mhm.
psychology, personal growth, and there's this process that we go through of like death and rebirth, right?
Mhm.
The metaphor of the phoenix. So this identity of being just a copywriter died,
Yeah. Mhm.
and what was that transition like, and what was the new identity that you felt like you grew into?
So the story I tell about how I ended up deciding not to be, and again, freelancing changed my life. I never want to like, I shit on it a little bit the same way that John Carlton does, because John used to do that too. He used to talk about like all clients suck. And I think all
Yeah.
clients do suck, especially when you're your own client, honestly, because then you suck. As well. But the short version is I did a letter for Alan Sultanic, who's a good friend of mine, who you've probably heard of, and J.D.
Yeah.
Bolt, who was his partner at the time, about 11 years ago now, because we're old men now. And that letter, they paid me 25 grand to do the letter, and I did it in about 6 hours, because I can do that, or I could, I still can do that. And that's good money, man. That's good fucking money. I'm not going to complain about that. When I was in my mid 20s, I never thought I'd make more than 40 grand a year, like, et cetera. But they went on and made like $10 million in sales in like a month and a half. Right. And I talked to Jay and I'm like, hey man, send me a bonus. And Jay, I give him shit for this whenever I talk to him and I say, thank you. He sent me $5,000. Right. And $5,000 is still a lot of money, inflation, whatever. But it just kind of like, it convinced me. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing, man? I need my own stuff. I need something of my own that I can do. I've made all these other people really, really rich. And yeah, I make a couple hundred grand a year, but I'm not making myself rich. I'm not making myself secure. I still have a fucking job, right? Like,
Yeah.
even though I didn't have a boss, I still had a job. I still had people I had to be accountable to. And really, like, it just pissed me off to the point that I was like, okay, I got to go out and start doing my own thing. And I had to, like, Jeff Walker was a mentor of mine, and he pulled me aside at one point and he even was like, why are you still behind the scenes? Why are you being the guy behind everything instead of actually being out there? Because I had spoken on his stage and things like that, but it was largely just this identity I had that I was just the guy who could write the copy. There's no way I could run a business. There's no way that I could like deal with all the, like, learn affiliate marketing and do this and do that and all that stuff. And here's the deal. I learned a lot of things when I started my own offers. I became a much better copywriter when I started my own offers, because when it's your money and your balls on the table, you learn your shit really, really, really quickly. But I also learned that if you get really, really good at the copy and that stuff, you can hire other people to do the other things. Like I don't run my business, right? I am not a business person. I am not even really the CEO. I am the product in my business more than anything. And then Mike Helikakis, who's been with me for like a decade now, actually does all the gritty stuff. So for people that are like afraid that like you're going to be stuck doing all the stuff in the business, yeah, for a while, but hopefully if you're good enough, you can get other people to come in and handle that shit.
Awesome. So it was just like that one project where it was a big success and it broke, and then it's just like I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah, it just
There's
got me
no
off my
option.
ass. Yeah, it just got me off
Yeah.
my ass to actually do a product, right? Because I had talked about it before. I had actually tried to do a best man speech thing years before that just never went anywhere because I didn't know what I was doing. Good product though. But then I was just like, well, screw it. I'm just going to get something done. And I was in a little phone mastermind thing at the time. I don't think it was even video at the time because again, I'm old. But and I was just like, screw it, I'm just going to get it done. And so I created my product, Text Your Wife into Bed, in like 2 weeks, I think. I just sat down and created this thing and got it done and put it up on ClickBank. I had no idea what I was doing. And then like a week or two later, all of a sudden I woke up one morning and I had $700 that I didn't have the day before. Right. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my, and I was like, I am addicted to this already. Right. Because I literally made money while I was sleeping. Right. And that was
Yeah.
because I wasn't sitting there just typing things out and doing, I had gotten, residuals and things like that from people before, quite good money as well, but I don't have control over that kind of thing. And as I say in my own stuff, if you watch like If I Wasn't Rich, I'd Be Dead speech and some other things, if I had stayed freelancing, I'd probably be dead right now. I cannot see how I would have navigated the things I personally went through over the last decade or so if I had had to worry about paying the goddamn bills and like trading money for time. There's no way I could have done it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I have it in my notes to come back to that. I do want to talk a lot about the skill of copywriting throughout this. So
absolutely.
um,
I can talk forever, so you just feel free to bump in whenever you need
to. Like you're known for what you ended up calling the PIG method, the punch in the gut emotional story, storytelling method. Yeah. So what is your all right? What's your biggest aim with that? And you always come out of the gate swinging. So what do you focus on in terms of your writing thinking as you're writing your first 300 to 500 words or whatever you consider?
So a couple of quick things. One, I don't write the first three to 500 words until the end, usually, quite honestly.
Okay.
It's something I teach people all the time, actually, that I think is very, very valuable. It's basically speed copywriting stuff. I'm known for I write very, very quickly when I want to write quickly, right? I usually don't sit down at the keyboard until I'm ready to write fast, because writing fast is where the energy comes from. And usually what I do is I start writing the easy stuff first, right? Because people always try to write the hard stuff first. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Because then you don't do anything until the hard stuff is done. So instead, I write the bullets, right? I write the price justification is going to be pretty much the same thing every single time. The close is going to be very, very similar every single time, right? All of that stuff's going to be done. And then you get that down on the page. And while that's happening, the back of your brain is hopefully crunching and crunching and crunching on your ideas and your mechanisms and story ideas and all those kind of things, what the stories are that you got from the client, all that kind of stuff. And then you can go back and actually write it from there. But the biggest thing I'm trying to figure out, especially if I'm doing a story lead, right? Because I am known for doing story leads, and I'm very, very good at it. I do not always do story leads, right? There are, there's some letters I don't even really tell very many stories in. It's a whole different kind of thing. It's more of a webinar style kind of thing, but I'm very good at the story leads. But for me, I'm just thinking about that moment. I'm thinking, what was it? I was looking at one. Oh yeah, that's what it was. A friend of mine sent me a letter that he wanted me to do a little work on. He pays me if I can beat his lead, and I usually do, and it's nice and it's easy money. But the lead that he showed me was about this wedding embarrassment thing, and it's like, oh my God, a bridesmaid, or my dress ripped. And I was like, okay, you kind of think you know what that story is, but the story they had was the dress ripped while she was getting out of her car before the wedding, and you're like, well, what? Like, that's not, where's the anguish there? Where's the humiliation there? Where's the, oh no, she had to I don't know, get some thread and sew it up or something. So obviously I rewrote it so that the thing rips during the wedding, it's in that kind of thing where there's actually some exquisite pain to it, right? But finding those moments of exquisite pain is the difficult part. Finding things like, he kissed me like his sister and I knew I was alone again. Or what's one of my favorites? Cassidy, look what you did to my dick. That's one of my favorites that I've ever written in my entire life for a hand job product. By the way, yes, you're going to have to put the swearing warning thing on your thing. I don't even do it on purpose. I just find myself doing it. But anyway, for me, it's all about that. What is the truth? What is the truth of the emotion? What is the truth of the pain? What is the truth? What is your prospect actually feeling about this problem? And that is scary stuff. Like when in my course, the P.I.G Method course, thepigmethod.com, a lot of it is me teaching people how to not be afraid of your own emotions and not be afraid of your own pain. I don't know you very well, Roy, at all. I think Roy Furr is an awesome name. But I'm sure you've been through plenty of shit in your life. I'm sure you've had the crap beat out. You're 40. You've had the shit beat out of you, right? Like in ways that I'm sure would curl my chest hair even more. And people, when people ask me what story should you tell in your sales letter, I always say, tell the story that terrifies you to tell. Tell the story that you don't want to tell, that you think if you told this story and you were in high school, you would get beat up by the football team, right? That's the story you tell, because that's where the vulnerability comes from, and that's where the truth comes from. Right. And it's interesting. I talk about truth, and I always say my stories are based on a true story, but obviously not every single moment of every single thing is going to be the thing. But the real truth I'm going for is always going to be the emotion of it, the pain, what is it like to be a woman whose husband just doesn't look at her anymore and instead is on his phone all the time, masturbating to porn. What is she feeling as a person when she looks at herself in the mirror or whatever? Getting into that.
Yeah.
I'm a large, hairy 45-year-old man, but I'm real good at pretending I'm a good 45-year-old woman. Let me tell you. Yeah.
So this really reminds me of the Hero's Two Journeys, which was inspiration for me in terms of storytelling and thinking about the internal versus external journey. So where have you studied storytelling beyond just copywriting books?
Yeah. So my background. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
And then what's the adaptation? I guess to some degree you've already talked about the adaptation, that it's not much happens in your story.
Yeah. Things happen, but it's the same story every time. Honestly, and I teach that in the course. Look at Harry Potter and look at Star Wars. It's the same fucking story, right? It's the exact same fucking story. You look at any of my sales letters, if you're analytical at all, you break it down, and it's the same fucking story every single time. But it's about what emotions and what beats you're kind of putting in it that are the really important part. I forgot exactly what was the first part of your question there. I forgot.
Like, where have you studied
Oh
storytelling?
yeah. So my background, I grew up in Grafton, Massachusetts, why I talk like this. I was always a sensitive kid and I was always kind of good at writing, but I grew up in a situation where that was like, I didn't know any professional writers of any kind, right? There's like, you can't write for a living. I'm in central Massachusetts. That's just not what you do. But I did theater stuff a little bit. I acted a little bit when I was younger. I was never a very good actor, but that experience made me good at being myself on stage, which is like, I play myself on stage quite often these days, and it's really quite fun. It's fun pretending to be me.
Yes.
And then I studied screenwriting a little bit in college. I wrote some plays, and storytelling has been something that I've, it's funny. It's really interesting because I still don't think I'm very good at it, which is really, really right? Like, I mean, maybe it's the imposter complex or whatever, but I look at these things and enough people have told me I'm really good at it that I'm like, well, I must be good at it, I guess. But I still don't feel that. I still in some ways feel like the frustrated 23-year-old who thought he was going to go off and be a screenwriter in Hollywood, but had no self-esteem.
I feel like part of that leads to like, I remember getting this lesson from Carlton, that if you ask enough questions to any successful person, you're going to find that place of insecurity or like who they're trying to prove wrong, like somebody in their background. Like when I was a freshman in high school, I had actually just gotten in trouble for borrowing a little bit of writing off the internet.
I see.
And that was like a separate teacher, a separate class. But then I wrote a story in English, and the English teacher said, this is too good for a freshman in high school.
But you actually
so I'm sure that you plagiarized it. Yeah. And like there were a couple things like I had totally slacked, and so I didn't turn in like early drafts or anything like that. But also I used the word amongst. Right.
And he was like, you can't use amongst.
Yeah. She said, like a freshman in high school doesn't correctly use the word amongst. And so then from that point forward, like everything that I wrote in high school, because I was still trying to prove her wrong, was amongst. And I think that so much of my identity as a writer, like I might've been okay as a writer before then, but so much of my identity of like, I'm a writer came from that.
Dude, having a chip on your shoulder is a valuable fucking thing. It really is. Like I had that when I was, I talked about this on something I was doing the other day, but like I used to be driven by my lack of self-esteem. My life sucked in so many ways. My wife hated me. I was really sick in a variety of ways, but I was good at this, right? I was good at like going out and getting the goddamn money and writing the letter that did that. And I needed to do that because I needed something to feel good about. And that was really, really valuable. These days it's harder because I'm properly medicated and a lot happier. And I have to find seriously, like I'm just not driven. I'm not trying to prove anything anymore. Like I'm like, I've reached a point in my life where I'm like, I've done some shit, whether people do better. I'm not jealous of anybody in any way anymore, as far as success goes or anything like that. There's plenty of people that are more successful, but it's harder. It's harder to actually get that hunger when you're not really actually hungry.
Yeah. It definitely changes. You have to find you have to find motivation elsewhere.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. So as a freelancer, I'm sure early on in your freelance career, a client would come to you and say, we have this product, we have this offer, this is what we want you to sell. And so you're coming up with a promotion kind of in response to that. Today, I'm sure that you're coming up with a promotion
from scratch. Yeah.
Well,
people do not come to me and say, hey, here's the product, will you sell it? Will you help me sell it?
Well, so
come to me and say, hey, here's the idea for the product, do you think it's worth selling? And then we talk about it. Yeah.
Well, what's your process of like coming up with the copy itself, the marketing itself, tied to like the product creation, all of that, and how's that changed through time?
Yeah, I actually have a whole course where I taught that years ago, and I'm actually going to put it back out at some point. But for me, it's all about the name. I really encapsulate a lot in the name of the product. I think about the name of the product because to me, the name of the product needs to communicate everything about it. The name of the product should sell the product all by itself, right? Text to the romance back. What does that teach you how to do, right? Like you know the mechanism. The result that we're hoping to get you, like all that kind of shit. It's really kind of there. Make him worship you. Well, I think I know what that's going to be about, right? Like I think about that kind of stuff a lot. before I kind of do anything else. And then usually the product will grow out of that. And there have been times we've done something first and then renamed it. Like I think actually our hand job product had a whole different name before we made it into Stroke of Genius, which Mike Halakakis came up with, which I still think is one of the greatest things ever, that we have a product called Stroke of Genius that sells incredibly well when we promote it. But yeah, for me, it's just about, I'm always just trying to figure out, actually, again, the course actually has all this stuff where I talk about picking out niches and things like that. But I'm just trying to figure out what is not really being addressed in that niche. Where can I kind of worm my way in that's going to be you basically either want to be able to come in like as a sub niche kind of thing where it's like, okay, it's not about getting your ex back, but it's about texting your ex back, right? Or if you're going for cold traffic and shit, you want to go the absolute opposite direction and come up with a really broad offer that you can hopefully blow out to the world, which is what Make Him Worship You is, right? Because that's much more of a generic kind of benefit as opposed to like a very kind of specific thing.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I mean, the title itself of the product becomes a positioning statement, right? And you're finding the position in the marketplace, and then everything can come from there. I believe at the point that you were doing all the text products, like, I mean, today everybody talks about text game or whatever, right? But you just identified that there was this gap. There's this new medium by which you can get the result that everybody's wanted forever, right? And so you created that content.
Yeah, because honestly, the story behind that is I was single and I'm a good copywriter and I was sexting with women and I was really good at it. Like when I discovered that I had a talent for it, right? Like, and as a variety of women, including my wife, will attest, my wife will tell you that my sexting is what actually got us together in the first place. And also sexting bought my house, which is going to be the name of a book at some point if I ever get around to kind of doing it. But yeah, it was just like, okay, this is different. This is mechanistically different than what else is out there. This is a thing people haven't really thought of. It was also at the time, texting was really, that was when, Tiger Woods, I think, got in trouble for texting with porn stars and stuff like that. So it was in the consciousness in a way that it really hadn't been before. And this idea that we could take, like, text the romance back. Okay, we're going to take sexting, but we're going to make it romantic was a really powerful positioning for us. That's what got me on television. So,
yeah. I like it. So you talked a little bit about your writing process before. You talked about okay, so let's say you have a product name, you decide it's time to sit down and write some copy, and then it sounds like you write kind of in chunks. So what do you want to have in place before you start writing? Is part of that chunking, do you come up with an outline beforehand, or is it all?
I don't anymore because I've internalized it, right? Like, I'm sure you've heard conscious competence and unconscious competence, et cetera. If I wanted to, you could give me something and I could literally just write copy off the top of my head and just talk it to you right now. And I would have no idea what I was saying. You could ask me afterwards, what did you just say? And I'm like, I have no idea what I just said. I hope you recorded it. That's what happens when I do consulting calls with people all the time. But I know the structure. Like, I just know the structure. I know the structure of when I'm creating the P.I.G method or my FOMO formula course that I'm doing or the other stuff. I know the structure of that because I've done it enough times now to kind of put it out there. Earlier on, I would outline things a bit, especially in a sales letter. I would write the subheads, right? So I would just kind of like break it down and figure out, I would sketch basically what I do is I start at the bottom, I do the easy stuff, and then I kind of just sketch things in as we go, right? It's almost like being a sculptor where you're just removing shit until suddenly you have what you want. But I'm just sketching things in, adding sentences, adding things here, and then eventually it kind of comes out. But I am not a linear writer in that way. My buddy Vin Montello, great guy. He is much more of the like start at the top and then you end up at the bottom, and it looks laborious and horrible to me because I hate the blank page, man. I fucking hate the blank page like we all do.
And I'm kind of maybe somewhere in between. I like to start, like, I have formulas that I lean on, that I have notes, and so I just copy and paste the notes into the document because I know working from the blank page is exhausting. And then I'm doing the same thing. I'm trying to identify, okay, how is this like darkest hour story? How is that represented by what I know about this offer, this product, this person, whoever it is, or me or whatever, and go from there. That's interesting. Where do you think that you learned this whole process of writing from the bottom up? Do you remember inspiration or?
It was just writing used to be. I'm very ADD and I have bipolar too, and I didn't know that for a really long time, right? So back in the day, writing was agony. Writing was like, every time I went to my desk, it was like slitting my wrists and bleeding on the keyboard and all that shit. And so I think it came from just like wanting to have something down that I could work from, as opposed to just torturing myself trying to figure out the headline and torturing. It's interesting because right now, now I just go write. It isn't that big of a deal. I think it's because I don't, my ego is not tied into it as much, right? It used to be like, this is who I am. My writing is who I am. Like that is the only thing valuable about me as a human being. But I think it just came from that. And it just seemed like it honestly just seems like the more natural way to do it to me. Why wouldn't you write the easy part first? Like, why wouldn't you do that? Because then you have something done. Like, it's great. It's like paying off, you pay off the credit card with the lowest balance first, because then you did it. You're done. Yeah. I haven't had credit card debt in a long time, but still, I hear it's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the approaches, and it's the approach that justifies itself through the emotional angle. Right?
You've accomplished something. You've accomplished.
Yeah. So what's something that fascinates you that's not just copywriting, marketing, entrepreneurship?
Oh man. I mean, I'm a psychology person. That's what I'm into. I know way too much about serial killers and cults and narcissists. A friend of mine, actually, he just figured out that he's been married to a pretty malignant narcissist for 5 years. And my wife and I yesterday were like helping to deprogram him from the things, because we both find that stuff really interesting. I do a fair amount of yoga. I play a lot of video games. Like I really, really like my video games, which I'm old enough now to just be like, yeah, I like playing video games and I don't feel embarrassed about it at all. So but I live a pretty simple life, honestly, but it's largely psychology stuff. That's what, if you look at my YouTube, it's all things about psychology and behavioral psychology and all sorts of crazy, a lot of World War II stuff now, because I'm interested in how fascism is taking over the world again, things like that.
Yeah.
Oh no, we talked about reality outside of marketing world in a podcast. How dare we?
Yeah. The psychology. So you talked about you had some background in drama and writing when you were younger. Did you go to college?
I did. Yeah, I went to Boston University.
And what did you study there?
So when I first got there, I actually I went to University of New Hampshire freshman year and was like a communications major because I didn't really know what to do. And then I went to BU and I enrolled. I was actually going to be an advertising major because I was like, okay, well, I'm creative, but you can't make a living being creative, right? That sounds stupid. I'm not going to be an author or something. I can't be that. And I got into advertising briefly. Didn't really like it. Didn't really get it. It was all brand related stuff. And then my dad died when I was 19. And after that, I just said, fuck it. And I kind of transferred over to the film and TV department and kind of went down that path. And that's what led me out to Los Angeles, where I, tried to kind of do the entertainment industry thing for a little while before realizing that was not for me. I am very, very grateful that I failed in Hollywood every single day. I think I certainly have the talent to be able to, have done well there if I had the mindset at the time and the experience at the time, but I think I'd be miserable if I was still there. Yeah. This is way better. I have, like what I do now is I get to be creative. I get to come up with cool shit. I get paid really well for it and I don't have to work all the time. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I don't know. I feel like the Hollywood press is a little bit more toxic than me interviewing you on a
conference. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have a whole thing on, I've had the experience of tasting mainstream fame with my Michael Fiore.
Yes.
Right. And that's really, if I hadn't gotten sick, I probably would have kept going down that path and would have been quote unquote famous as this other person, probably doing more television and things like that. And I'm very grateful that didn't happen as well, because as far as I can tell, like niche fame is fun, right? Like I go to a copywriting thing, I'm like Elvis of the copywriting. It's awesome. It's great. It's a fun time. It's great to be like, it's so cool to be able to make people happy just by being a nice human being. Like, it's the coolest thing in the world. Just like, oh no, I'm not an egotistical asshat. Yes. Hello. Nice to meet you. And they get really happy. And I'm like, this is the greatest gift that you can have in the world, to be able to make people happy just by not being a douchebag. But like the mainstream, like I've been recognized on the street as Michael Fiore before, and that freaks me the fuck out. Like that is not cool. And I firmly believe that like mainstream fame is a toxic thing past a certain point. Kanye West would be a better human being if he wasn't famous. Yeah.
I imagine the energy that you get when you're encountered on the street as Michael Fiore is like,
it's women flirting with me. It's honestly women flirting with me. Usually it's women who are like, hi, are you like, there's like a thing, which is cute. It's nice. It's they're 19-year-old me would be shocked that women would ever like actively flirt with me instead of me having to like beg for attention or whatever else, because I was so frustrated and incel-y and all that crap. Yeah.
So, let's dive into this. Like, if I wasn't rich, I'd be dead. You were going down that celebrity path. You were very successful with digital romance.
Yeah.
And then you
and my head was gigantic, by the way. I was people that know me well, like if you talk to like Kevin Rogers, a good friend of mine, like he's like, you were a dick back then. I'm like, I was a dick back then. You are correct. And it's partly because I was undiagnosed bipolar 2, which makes you quite narcissistic. And then also I had people telling me I was the best copywriter in the world. You're a genius. You're all these, like you literally have people just telling you these things. And if you are prone to narcissism at all, well, shit, that is some damn good food for that kind of thing. So yeah, I was going down that path and then I got hit by Lyme disease, like a truck. And that just stopped life, really.
And didn't that go undiagnosed for a long time too?
It went undiagnosed for 20 years. Yeah. I got diagnosed when I was 34. And I talked to my friends who've known me for years, and there's a joke, like my buddy Rob Haskell, who was my roommate 20 years ago, was joking. He's like, yeah, back then your skin was just gray all the time. And it's true. There's pictures of me where my skin is kind of gray and I was exhausted all the time. And like, I thought I was just lazy, because I was like, well, nobody else is exhausted all the time. And I was dealing with my car wreck injuries and all that kind of crap too. But yeah, like 20 years. And then it just kind of got to the point that I think I was in a moldy house, and then that contributed to everything. And all of a sudden I could barely get out of bed. I was angry all the time. I could only work for maybe an hour or two a day at best. I'm very, 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 very extremely lucky that I had a business that was making money, where all I did for a couple of years is I would write like 2 products and 2 sales letters a year. And I was making a couple $1 million a year doing that. And I don't believe in God, but thank whatever, that I was able to do that. I threaded the needle really fucking well, because there's plenty of, in the grand multiverse, there are many, many universes in which that didn't happen. And I either died or ended up on the streets screaming at people like the people I see in Seattle who are homeless and don't get mental health services.
Yeah. 40, 50 hours a week with some like, I don't know, Amazon warehouse shop or something.
Yeah, whatever.
That same illness would have just.
There's no way. There's like, what can you do? I mean, my wife's been dealing with some really horrible chronic illness stuff for the last several years, which was great. We finally get through my stuff and I'm like, hell yeah. I'm like, oh, come on. Are you really? But there's no way she could have held a job the last 4 years. There's no way. So like, I mean, if I wasn't in a position to be able to pay our bills, I don't know what we would have done or what she would have done. So it's like, dude, like I'm not a like you'll never see me being like, hey, check out my, like, no matter how much money I do or do not make, I could make $1 billion tomorrow. You will never see me out there being like, check out my fucking car and my giant mansion with 7 pools and shit like that. I do not care about any of that stuff. Money to me is safety. Money to me is just like, you got to like, the world's hard. The world's really fucking hard. And money is pretty much the only thing that makes it easier, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's too true.
I'm so bad at this like BizOp guru thing. just like oh yeah, I'm like, no, copywriting is hard, marketing is hard. You have to bust your ass. Not everybody can do it. And I don't give a shit about the flash and dazzle bullshit.
Well, no, it's interesting. Like the more success someone has had as a copywriter, the more I hear the exact same thing. Like I remember being impacted in a big way by Bill Bonner. And he gave a keynote at AWAI like back in 2010, I think it was, because I got to talk to him that time. And he said, his quote almost matched yours, talking about bleeding out all over the page.
Absolutely,
and
it's hard.
And stuff. And he said, like, the first thing that you want to do if you want to start any kind of copywriting project is make sure you have your loaded Colt 45 in your left desk drawer and a 5th of whiskey or scotch in your right desk drawer. And then that's when you proceed to bleed out all over the page, because
you do. And Carlton calls it gun to the head copy, right? Like, what would you write if you had a gun to your head? But it's hard, man. Like, especially when you're new. Oh my God, those first couple sales letters I wrote were fucking torture. It just was so hard. Yeah.
Well, okay. So going through that process and undiagnosed bipolar, going back to being a freelancer.
Yeah.
What was the experience like for you when you did bleed out all over the page and then you sent your copy into the client and they gave you feedback that wasn't, Chris, you're a fucking genius?
No, it depended who the client was. It really depended. Yeah. If it's somebody I respect, I mean, like Jeff Walker was a client of mine, right? And Jeff was a friend of mine and a mentor of mine. And if he was like, I don't think that, I would be like, okay, well, you know what the hell you're doing and whatever. If it, same thing with Jeff Paul. And I mean, I worked for a lot of people that are good marketers, right? In that case, I mean, I was young and I knew I had talent, but I wasn't the shit, right? I didn't really believe in myself. So I was able to be humble enough to do that. It's what sucks is when you get the big red document of doom from somebody that has no fucking idea what they're talking about, right? And you're just like this is too long. We would never. I'm like, why did you hire me? Why did you give me 15 grand to do this for you if you're just gonna kind of rip it to shreds? I mean, at this point in my career, the goal should be to get a big enough reputation and to charge enough that people don't fuck with your copy. And this is actually a very important thing. If you don't, the less you charge, the more people are going to fuck with your copy, right? Just like the less somebody pays you in general, the more of a pain in the ass they are. Like people who buy my $47 Texture X-Back products can be a real pain in the ass. People that give me $6 grand to join the Pig Method program, they're really nice. Like they're really, really nice. They're really, really respectful, etc. Because the power dynamic is very different. And they obviously, if they're giving me that amount of money, it must be because I know what I'm doing, right? Like that kind of thing. So there really is a powerful thing to have being able to charge enough that people respect you in that way. I do say in that way a lot. I got to stop doing that. Local ticks. Yeah.
So geez, I'm having like a complete brain freeze because
all good, it happens.
So if you could go back to the because a lot of people who listen to my podcast are newer. I mean, you probably know there is a huge contingent of people who are becoming copywriters, right?
Yeah, and it's too bad. I mean, some of them here actually. Let me just rant on this for a second.
Yes, please.
Copywriting is not a biz op. It's not a biz op. Like I hate that it's being sold as a biz op. I hate that there are people like Alex, whatever his name is, being like anybody can do this. If you can blah blah blah, just swipe this. Like basically, they're just telling people to go out and steal copy, and that's how you do it, and all that kind of shit. Isn't that? That's not what it is. That's just not what it is. It's hard. No. It's hard. It's work. You will not get to the 6-figure mark if you are just like half-ass phoning it in or whatever. It's work. It's going to take you a while to get good. I'm sorry. Like also, here's another pet peeve of mine that I've been ranting about lately. If you're writing blog posts, you are not a copywriter. You are a content writer. It is a totally different job.
Yeah. So I have my own thing that distinguishes, because you can write a blog post as copy,
absolutely,
right?
If it is meant to be persuasive towards a CTA, et cetera. But when it's like content mill stuff, it's a totally different kind of thing. If you're getting paid by the word, you're not a copywriter. I'm sorry. Like,
yeah. There's a business result. I rant on this all the time too. If you are trying to write as a writer and you're trying to sell writing, you are not a copywriter. True. If you are selling a business result, whether that's leads, customer sales, profits, whatever, that's what becomes copy, where there is a call to action to generate the result at the end.
Yep.
So you've written a ton of VSLs, and there's been a lot of, I mean, I remember getting started and there was always this question, should we invest in the extra expense of VSLs because it was all text on page, and VSLs seemed like a big thing. Yeah. And then there was definitely a rise in VSLs because it seemed like anything you put to VSL. Yeah.
Basically, you could take any given sales letter, make it a VSL, and get like a 30% bump at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. But now the advantage of purely media has fallen off. And yet when I see or hear a Chris Haddad VSL, there is something captured there that doesn't get captured in the text. So
it's the rhythms. Yeah.
It's the rhythms. I'm curious. Tell me more. Like, what do you mean by it's the rhythms?
It's the way, especially letters that I wrote in Keynote, right? Because I did write like language designer in Keynote, which means you can only fit so many words per slide, right? Which actually gives you a certain discipline and whatnot. But the performance is important to me. The person has to know how to read my copy, and if you read it, you'll feel these kind of. I'm a drummer too. I'm not a very good drummer, but I do play drums to a certain degree, and there's just that feel of like being kind of taken along on a path to a certain degree. And also there is a hypnotic quality to what I write on purpose, right? I'm not like an NLP guy. I think a lot of NLP is bullshit. Like the by now you should have made it, like fuck off. Like that doesn't fuck.
Yeah. it's not casting spells. It's
no. But it's understanding humans, and it's understanding language, and that, language is the operating system of the mind, and that you can have pretty profound influence that way. But it's a lot of just I think it's just because my shit feels true to people. It just feels like a human being wrote it. It feels like there's a real, even though I think my copy is sometimes overly florid and writerly. And I think that is something I try to discipline out of myself, but I also like writing fun sentences.
Yeah. Well, but it feels like you take like a Ben Savinga, and there was definitely a poetry to his writing. There is a poetry to his writing. He's that isn't necessarily captured in like a 50 headlines formula books or something.
No, not at all. And that's because Gary cares, man. You can feel it. You can feel that he cares in his copy. I mean, you can feel that Gary is one of the least hypey copywriters, but God, the persuasion is so powerful, right? Like it's beautiful shit, man. Yeah.
I remember reading his olive oil letter and feeling like I'd been doing myself a disservice for my entire life by not buying fresh pressed olive oil.
And you're like, I don't care about olive oil at all, but geez,
I'm like, realistically, I probably can't tell the difference, but
in this moment, because there's that poetry and romance and seduction to it. And, I was talking to somebody, who was I talking to yesterday? I was on my podcast with, I forget who I was interviewing yesterday, because I do a lot of these things now, but we were talking about the idea that people don't want to be sold, but I'm like, but they kind of do want to be seduced, right? They kind of do want to be, especially marketers do, by the way. I love selling to marketers and copywriters, because selling to marketers and copywriters, when they figure out what you're doing, but they just want to buy more because they did, right? They're like, you just did this thing with this cool technique that blah, blah, blah. And then they're even more sold at that point instead of getting angry about it. It's really cute.
And they try to dissect the game, and then they come along for the game.
Well, dude, when I did my launch for the P.I.G method, my original launch for the P.I.G method, I got so many people to join my group just because they quote unquote wanted to watch and learn from the launch, right? Yeah. Like how cool is that your pre-launch content can be the launch itself? Like that's pretty damn cool.
Yeah. I think you and Jeff Walker are basically in that crew.
Yeah, Jeff taught me a lot back in the day. He's a great guy.
Yeah. That interest in hypnosis and NLP thing is interesting, because I have my own my own subscriptions to hypnotists, people who teach hypnotism.
Sure. Do you know Igor Ludikowski by any chance?
I'm familiar with him.
He was a client of mine way back in the day, and he and his partner, I'm forgetting his name, came to Seattle to teach like a 6-day workshop on therapeutic hypnosis, basically. And they invited me to come down because I was writing a letter for them. So I spent 6 days kind of in that. And I think that was very useful years later.
Yeah.
It taught me a lot about, also I was good at it. Like there were people that were there who were like, how long have you been doing this? I'm like, 2 days. And they're like, well, they literally got mad at me for it. Right. And it's like, I was like, yeah, but I think it was because it's so similar to what I was already doing as far as the writing goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with hypnosis, there's a fascination with, either direct hypnosis or indirect hypnosis, all the storytelling stuff. If you study like Milton Erickson, he almost never, he became a master of direct hypnosis, but my understanding is later, it just became all conversational. It became, hey, I'm going to tell you this story, and
absolutely.
And 30 minutes later, you wake up.
Yeah. And I think I've just I haven't really studied NLP beyond that kind of hypnosis thing, but I did a lot of that stuff. But I think I just I've internalized some of it, and it's the same thing with Dirty Talk, right? I've written products on Dirty Talk, and that's the same thing about hypnosis. It's about giving, what it is. People don't want to make decisions. People don't want to think. And so if you can do it for them, they really like you. And if you can kind of I almost try to create a new voice in the head, right? We've all got that voice in our head, and I want my voice to be the voice in your head now instead of the voice that you normally have there, basically.
Okay. As you're doing that, going back to something you said in the beginning, you talked about all your stories are done as the first person, or most of your stories are done.
Yeah, occasionally not, but I like, even when I'm writing about a third person thing, I'm writing as the person writing about that. I'm on the inside of the person who's telling the story in that case, as opposed to the actual story. And it's about, say it's a doctor, right? And they're talking about a patient of theirs and talking about their story, but it's about what the doctor is feeling about that motivates the doctor to then want to go off and create a supplement or whatever else.
Interesting. So that informs not just language choices, but how you're going to react to something. So if I'm writing from the outside and I'm a doctor telling the story of this person, right?
Yeah.
Then I'm just going to say, this person did this and this thing happened and they took this and this was the cure.
Oh no, what you would do is you would talk about the guy, so, say your best friend from college who was always the strongest athlete you knew, and then he went off to war, and he actually became a soldier for the U.S. military, and he joined the Marines, and he ended up doing all this kind of stuff, and then he got injured in some way, and he came back, and he comes to your office one day, and he's just tired, and this guy that you always thought was the biggest, most masculine man you've ever seen suddenly is like, kind of shrunk into himself, and it turns out he has low testosterone, and you need to help this guy get back to being who he was. But you're telling his story, but you're talking about it's your story of him. Right at that point.
Well, I was trying to contrast with that method, so that it allows you to like have the emotional reaction of the doctor, of like oh, I remember this guy when he was so like just physically incredible. Like I remember whatever situation from when we were kids growing up, and now like I see him and there's such a transformation, and like I have this big emotional reaction. Are there markets where maybe you've trained copywriters and they've had struggles with doing something like that? Like I've done a ton of work in financial, and there's this bias.
I hate financial copy, by the way. I'm very happy that I've mostly avoided ever touching it over the years. Yeah.
There's a bias that you can't be emotional with financial, and yet I remember one of my early clients, Casey Research, one of their most successful front end promos was my mom's IRA. And
of course it was.
and it was about this guy, like, this is how I invest in my mom's IRA. Like, these are the companies that I invest in.
That's beautiful. I mean, money is one of the most emotional topics in the world, right? Like, I mean, I had a friend commit suicide a month and a half ago or so. And it was largely because he lost all his money in crypto, right? Like he spiked he went from like, I think 2 million to 40 million or something like that. And then he lost everything. And it wasn't losing the money that made him want to jump off his fucking balcony. It was the shame that he's the one that did it, right? That it was the shame. I'm going to get teary here because I love the guy. But it was the shame that he was responsible for that I think is that what causes people to say, like with my car wreck thing years ago, it was all my fault. And that was the hardest part of it. That was the most painful thing beyond the physical pain was I did this to myself. Yeah.
Yeah. That feeling of I screwed up is so often, something that we want to run away from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We want to escape. We want freedom from it.
And the hard part is being able to. One thing I've worked really hard in my life is taking responsibility, right? Like being willing to be like, that was me. That's my faults. Even with people who I've hurt in the past, when I came out of my bipolar fugue, I made a lot of apologies. So.
Do you have any like practices, like I think meditation, journaling, that sort of thing, which I do on a regular basis, or therapy, anything that have helped you kind of connect with these things for yourself?
I do a lot of yoga. I am one of the least spiritual people you'll ever find in your life. I don't believe in all the stuff, but I do believe in the silence and the space. I'm learning how to be present. I spend a lot of time I don't do like formal meditation, but I do things that are meditative quite often, just to like center myself and spend time there. I spend a lot of time just gaining self-awareness over the years too, like learning how to, I think the most beautiful thing you can do is learn to accept yourself, right? And that doesn't mean, and I grew up in like Catholic in Massachusetts, where it's just like, if there's anything wrong with you, everything is wrong with you, right?
Oh, you were born, therefore something is wrong.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, right? Like, but you can never admit you ever did anything wrong, because then you're a piece of shit, right? It's like you either need to be perfect or you need to be not. Much like my ex-wife would actually kind of say. I forget where I was going with it, but either way, it's just what I really try to teach people is how to be more honestly yourself, and how to look at your demons and not be afraid of them, and how to understand that everyone else is going through that as well. And and like pain is a power, right? Pain is a power. I've been through my own shit. You've been through your shit. I know what it's like to be in literal agony for years at a time, like crying in bed, begging, being willing to give everything you have. And that sucks, but man, it's useful, right? Like it sucked at the time. It sucks to have gone through it, but the compensation is, I understand that shit, and I can empathize with people in a very powerful way. And everybody's been through whether it's physical pain or whatever else, we all been hurt. So
yeah, my very first YouTube video for anything where I was just talking about business was "We're all fucked up, broken, and insecure."
Absolutely.
And I think there was a realization there that like, I don't know, just like the realization struck me that we've all been through something like that. And the crazy thing that happens is when you realize that about not just yourself, but everybody, that we all have our own traumas, we all have our own background.
You're not special. I'm not. I talk about this a lot too. You're not special, and that's awesome. I'm not special. Nobody is fucking special. We all go through this.
So like the barriers to, say, talking to a CEO or some successful business owner or whatever, there are some competency challenges, right? Sure. Like you can't necessarily come from nowhere and have this realization and then say, oh, you run, $10,000 a day in ads, I can be your copywriter, right? Like that's not going to automatically make you that, but you're going to be less anxious about talking to the person who has the capability to run $10,000 a day in ads.
Or $1 million a day in ads. I know people that run hundreds of thousands of dollars a day in ads.
Yeah.
You know the difference between them and the rest of everybody else?
What's that?
Just bigger numbers. Like it's the same. The math is the same. That it's bigger numbers and having the balls to go out and do it usually.
Yeah. To commit to the bigger test budget.
Yeah, totally. And you can get funds.
Yeah. All right. Let's start the wrap up as we're reaching.
We're just getting started, Roy. Come on.
I know. This is the fun stuff, but each of us have other things to do.
Absolutely.
So if someone wants to be much better at copy, and this is kind of a setup for your call to action, but it's also like zooming back before we get into the call to action, like principles and strategies. If someone wants to be much better at copywriting for client projects or their own business, what's the single biggest thing that you'd recommend that they focus on?
Study psychology, man. It's all psychology. Like actually, here's the thing. Study copy, but also study persuasion. Like this is what we do. We are not, I think the copywriting ghetto is a problem for me personally, right? Because I'm very good as a copywriter and I'm very well known as a copywriter, but I'm also very successful as a entrepreneur, info marketer, things like that, right? And it can be difficult when people are just like, oh, you're the copy guy. But I'm like, no, I know a lot about persuasion and I can teach you webinar shit. I can teach you all sorts of stuff and it can be very easy to get stuck in that thing. But like, it's everything that you learn, sales training, everything that all kind of goes into it. Learning the basics of psychology and the deeper stuff about cognitive biases. You want to get really good at copy, go learn cognitive biases up and down, left and right. There's a great book. It's a giant green book. I think it just says cognitive biases on it or something on the front of it. It is well worth checking out. Another great book in that regard is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Absolutely. Kahneman. Love that one. He won Nobel Prize for work on cognitive biases and behavioral economics. It's beautiful stuff. I love that stuff. Yeah, fascinating to learn all the ways that our brains try to shortcut and like it helped us survive, right? It helped us survive to have all these shortcuts, right? But at the same time, listen, I'm not religious, but I understand why evolution made human beings religious, right? Like why it was I don't believe in any of it. I think it's actually problematic as far as how it affects the world, especially these days. But I totally get why having those kind of unifying things that allow you to control or persuade people to do kind of things is very, very valuable, right? It's useful. Yeah. That could be a whole separate conversation. Going back to like myth, like how did the belief that there was some power creating the thunder in the sky? Because human beings are always, we look for patterns, right? We are pattern-seeking animals. Like, look at all the conspiracy theories that you see. Even like there's like they're everywhere at this point. The misinformation is everywhere, and it's because we're always looking for simple answers, right? Like complex answers are terrifying. We always want the simplest answers we can kind of find, and so our brains will create these patterns and create these answers. Confirmation bias. When you look at people who are like, here's all the proof the election was stolen. I'm like, none of that is proof, but your brain is telling you it is because you want it to be, but it's not. Your brain is telling you it is because you want it to be. I think about confirmation bias every day. It's huge. It's one of the biggest, most, it is we all do it, right? But the key I think is to be aware of it and to try to make adjustments for it. That's what scientists do, is like you try to create control so your confirmation bias is not involved. Yeah. So, Chris, obviously there's so much more that could be learned from you.
if somebody wants to go deeper,
Yeah.
Obviously you have the podcast, which they can subscribe to. Also, there's the pigmethod.com.
Yep.
What are they going to get? How do they sign up? I'll make sure there's links in the description because I'm a good YouTuber and podcaster.
Yep.
So what do they get? What's the best place to connect with you?
So go to thepigmethod.com, which is
Yes.
spelled exactly how it is, and go in there, opt in. You'll get to see a video where I tell you a story, and you will not understand why I am telling you that story for the first 6 or 7 minutes or so. And I will even say, why am I telling you this story? And at the end of it, you will know why I'm telling you the story. And yes, I will also try to get you to get on a phone call to see if you're the right person to get into my program and things like that. But you will learn a lot about why emotions and why stories about things that seem irrelevant to the topic at hand can be extremely powerful in your copy, if that makes any sense.
That's to me, that makes a ton of sense. And it's interesting. It's about finding the message behind the message. There's kind of an inception element that goes on there too. I like it. So go to thepigmethod.com. What's the best way for them to find the podcast too?
The ChrisHaddadShow.com, or just look for Chris Haddad on iTunes or Spotify or anything like that. We're 30 something episodes in. It's a weird show. It is very casual. It's something similar to what we do here, because these are the conversations I like to have. But basically, I just get my friends on or people I know. Rory Sutherland, who's a big deal at Ogilvy Advertising, did one, and I just talk to people for an hour to an hour and a half, and we just see where the conversation goes. Sometimes it's about marketing, sometimes it's about pro wrestling or whatever. But it all it is not a like, here's 3 ways to write a headline show. It is a, let's talk to people about the journey they went through to become successful, the failures they went through, the pain they go through now. My buddy Scott Ruick and I did one called how to be successful when your wife hates you. One of my favorite episodes, which is about the things that people don't talk about in entrepreneurship that go on beyond the scenes.
I listened to that episode and it was excellent. It was excellent. All right. So I'll include the links in the description to the pigmethod.com and the chrishaddadshow.com. And Chris, thank you so much for being on Breakthrough Marketing Secrets.
Yeah. Happy to be here, my friend. Nice to meet you.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite things about podcasting is like, it's the greatest networking tool known to man. It is like, there's nothing like, because you can get a lot of people to show up to be interviewed for a podcast that you could never get on the phone regularly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. It works very well for that. So it was great to finally meet you. The Venn diagram of our networks overlaps
many people. Yeah.
Yes. And to everyone who's stuck with us, I hope you got a ton of value out of this. I know that I did, and I took a ton of notes. And thank you for listening to another episode of Breakthrough Marketing Secrets. I'll catch you again next time.
Thank you once again for tuning in to this daily episode of Breakthrough Marketing Secrets. Remember, check out the links with this episode for even more value. Now make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, and engage in every way you can to keep this show going and growing and delivering daily value to you. I'll catch you soon for your next big breakthrough.